What's going on, guys, and welcome back to the world's okayest physical therapist podcast, hosted by me, Dr. Hint, rolling solo today. Today, we're going to be taking a look at Fascia 101. What is it? How does it respond to manual therapy, which is what physical therapists do, as well as kind of what its form and its function are, and how it can be pathogenic and how it's supposed to respond normally. But before we get too far into it, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and share this with at least one person in order to help everybody be more educated in the healthcare environment system to know how they can get the best healthcare that they need. Also, please consider checking out Patreon, Spotify, YouTube, and give us a like and a share there, as it really helps with the algorithm. Without further ado, let's get into fascia. So what is fascia? It is a body-wide network of connective tissues that surround and penetrates all structures. And by all structures, what it means is like the skin, muscles, ligaments, tendons, joint capsules, all these things. Basically, fascia is just about everywhere throughout the body, and it surrounds a lot of things like organs, like muscles, and it helps connect everything together. The goal of fascia, its purpose, is to transmit force, to help accept force throughout the body, while maintaining structural integrity. So it's the idea that it's going to help your muscle accept force while performing its task. Like we'll talk about later, most of your muscle bundles and muscle groups are surrounded by fascia, and fascia does not contract. It retains its shape and it accepts a certain degree of deformation. It gets pulled and it elongates, but then it comes back to its original length. And that's what provides a lot of structure around muscles and around organs and around joints, for example. And all of that's, again, its goal is to help your body accept force so it can maintain its structure, so it can continue to do the tasks that you're asking it to do, which is movement and loading. And this is from Bordoni and Myers, a review of theoretical fascial models from 2020. Is actually those definitions, in case you couldn't read it because you are busy walking, running, or listening in the car. So what is fascia, though? Well, it's collagen fibers, elastin fibers, ground substance, and cells. Collagen fibers are the ones that have the high tensile strength and structure. They're thicker, they're stronger, and they're kind of, I think of them almost like steel cables. They're there to resist high tension. Elastin fibers are the ones that give it the fascia resilience and elasticity, allowing it to stretch and return back to shape. So a good balance and a good ratio of collagen and elastin is what healthy fascia needs in order to, again, accept that load, accept resistance, to get pulled, to get stretched, but then come back and return to its original length. Ground substance is the most interesting one, if you ask me. It's a gelatinous fluid rich in polysaccharides that require hydration in order to continue to do their function. Meaning, as you get dehydrated, the ground substance, the collagen fibers, the elastin, all of them aren't as efficient at doing their job because they become more brittle, because the water around them, which is captured in the ground substance, allows them to continue to do their job. The more dehydrated they get, the more those like cell level bonds break down, and it makes the tissue just less efficient at accepting load. It's one of the reasons why people talk about being hydrated is so important, and not just drinking water, but also having proper amount of electrolytes. That way the water stays in your body. Is so things like your skin, your ligaments, your tendons, your intervertebral discs, all of those things that have fascia or connective tissue in them can stay hydrated. And then finally, of course, is the cells. These are fibroblasts. B standing for building, so they're fibrobuilders, if you want to think about it that way, because sometimes blasts is confusing for people. But these are cells that go in and produce the fibers, the elastin and the collagen, and they maintain that, because constantly when you're working out or you're exercising, running, so on and so forth, you're constantly breaking down the fascia, and it has to be rebuilt. This is great for you because as the fascia is being broken down, it's learning, I'm putting air quotes in there, which direction it's supposed to be resisting force in the most. So if you have, for example, your hamstrings, your Achilles tendon, it's learning that it has to accept force from the ankle, and that ankle is going to be, as the toes are being pushed up towards your shin bone, it's going to be stretched. So it's going to lay down more collagen, more elastin in a north to south direction to kind of resist forces that way, to be built up to accept load so it can jump, run, so on and so forth. Versus, say, for example, your abdominals, where you're doing a lot of rotational movement. Well, now the fascia is going to, again, quote, learn, as it's being reinforced over and over again by your pattern of movements, that there has to be more fibers laid down in different directions in order to resist like rotational forces. And that's one way how your body can cause the fascia to respond in different ways, that you can have different buildups in other human beings because you've reinforced certain movement patterns, and then at a cellular level, the cells are responding differently because they're just responding to force and tension, but the force and tension you're choosing to load it with is leading to muscle group impacts, range of motion impacts, so on and so forth. Yeah, let's move on to the next one. So there's different layers and different types. There's superficial fascia, which is found directly under the skin. It's looser, it can contain fat and muscle fibers. And then there's the deep fascia. This is very dense. It's very fibrous, and it wraps individual muscles, muscle groups, and it contains more elastin. If you've ever had to do like a dissection in middle school, high school, or even in college, a lot of times the animal you're dissecting, once you get underneath the skin, if you take a look at the muscles underneath, there's this shiny, almost white layer that has very specific fiber directions that seems to come over the muscles. That's the fascia that we're talking about for deep fascia. And if you ever look at a human back, if you go and just type in muscles of the human back and it's removed the skin layer, even the cartoons are going to have a ton of white fibers, white colored tissue around the muscles in the low back. And that's the sort of deep fascia that we're talking about. It's very dense, it's very fibrous, and this is helping you accept load. But you can imagine how this is a non-contractile tissue. That means it doesn't contract voluntarily. It does accept load, it does get elongated, and it can be shortened, but it doesn't contract on its own. It's there to help the muscles do their job. And basically it's there to help provide you, again, structure so you can do the motion that you want to do. There's also visceral fascia, which is not really in the realm of what I'm talking about today, but that just wraps around organs and helps connect them to the body. But again, the function is it helps connect bones, muscles, and organs, and helps transmit forces and provide support. So again, if you go and look at the human back without that skin layer, you're going to see a ton of fascia right around the back of the hips up into the low back, because that's where your body has to accept a lot of force, rotational and compressive. And you're going to see the same thing, like for example, like in the ankle and the hips and such. But the cool part, the reason why I really wanted to do this episode of the podcast, is because it acts also as a sensory network connected to the brain. And so we now have to talk about the properties. So fascia is viscoelastic, meaning its stiffness varies with the composition, the collagen and the elastin, and with water. This allows changes through cellular signaling, right? So if you're dehydrated, you're going to be less elastic, right? It's not going to be able to do the same amount of stretching that it could be if it was properly hydrated. But certain parts of your body, certain fascia, is going to be designed to be more stiff than elastic. And again, part of this is going to be driven by your lifestyle. This is where you, by the choices that you make every day, are changing not quite the cellular makeup. I mean, you do that as well, but you're changing the fascial makeup of your body, because you're teaching your body what loads it has to respond to over time. And if you don't give it new stimulus, new movement patterns, stretching, mobility, for example, the fascia is not going to respond because it doesn't need to, because you haven't taught it that it has to accept force in a certain area. Force transmission, we've kind of hit this already several times, but it's important to understand with what comes next, which is it helps transmit mechanical stresses faster than muscles through fascial chains. What does this mean? This means, for example, that if you're jumping on both of your feet up and down, that fascia, as you're landing, as your toes are going from pointing straight down to coming up towards your shins, it's the fascia that's responding and accepting load first before your calves ever even get involved. That's the power of fascia, that elastic power of the fascia to accept load and to help take a little bit of that burden off the muscles. Now, as you might expect, just like your muscles have nerves, fascia have nerves. They're not, again, contractile, but they are sensory. And that means your body, your brain, your spinal cord is paying a lot of attention to how much force is going through that fascia. Too much force to the fascia becomes a problem, and the brain's going to recognize that. This means, though, that the nerves are into the fascia. So when the fascia is being pulled and relaxed, the mechanoreceptors are going to respond by signaling to the brain, saying, hey, I'm being pulled. Hey, I'm relaxing. One of the nerves that does this, I believe, is called the Golgi tendon organ, which is a proprioceptive sensory receptor that's located in muscle tendon junctions. So that's right there with that fascia that helps monitor muscle tension. So this is really important for your body, almost subconsciously in a lot of people, to be aware of how much load a muscle group and the associated fascia are under in order to determine how much more that brain wants to activate the muscle. Because there is a certain threshold where the brain is going to realize this is just not worth it. This is going to do more harm than good. The tendons are under so much tension that they're going to tear, and that would leave us incapable of doing the movement pattern that's being asked. So there is a safety feature, and part of that is baked in from mechanoreceptors. But it also works great for manual therapy, like we're about to see, because that means there's a way for physical therapists to go in there and to cause the muscle to release, and it causes the brain to realize that the fascia is under too much tension, or to simulate the fascia being under too much tension in order to get an entire muscle group to relax, which is effectively what trigger point release becomes. So before we get there, though, we have to talk about fascial chains. There are fascial chains. These are continuous chains, if you want to think about a series of connective tissues that run from one area all the way up to there. So they can have a distant effect. One really good example is the sole of your foot. There's something called the plantar fascia that connects to the hamstrings, which connect up into the low back, which connect up through the mid back, which connect all the way up into the cervical spine. So literally from the soles of your feet to the back of your head, you have one continuous interconnected fascia chain that is all talking to each other. And that's why you can see bad adaptations coming in from someone who has like plantar fasciitis, and the rest of the chain from the sole of the foot all the way up into the mid-back is going to adapt and change, because one, you're going to be walking different because you're in pain. So the fascia now is not going to have the same load. It's not going to have the same stimulus. So it's going to start tightening in some places and loosening in others. And the muscle groups are going to respond accordingly as well. But literally, you have one continuous chain of fascia from the sole of your foot all the way up to the back of your head. This means that having a treatment, doing manual therapy, going in and trying to release trigger points or release muscle knots or stretch the fascia in some area of the body, say the ankle, the calf, can lead to effects all the way up the chain that are in a distant and remote part of the body compared to where you think the pain is, and that will still have an effect. The same can be true, though, where if you're having some sort of history of ankle pain and you're also starting to get low back pain, that would be distant and remote, right, from the ankle. And it could also be that the fascia all the way up there is responding to how now you're walking differently, or how there's different load going through the low back and the hip because of how you've changed your walking pattern. That's what this slide is talking about, where it says remote effects. Treatment in one area produces changes in distant regions. Working on the fascia of the low back, working on the muscles of the low back can improve what we call in physical therapy your gait, your walking, and that can in turn maybe reduce the amount of strain that's going through your ankle or your plantar fascia on the sole of your feet. Because if you have a bad gait pattern because of hip weakness or tightness, the ankle could be trying to pick up the extra slack. And so that just, again, without going too far into the weeds, kind of shows how the entire body is a system, and the fascia connects everything together, and a problem in one place very rarely stays in that one place and will go to different areas just because of how connected everything is. So all of that, we've talked about dysfunction, we've talked about structure, we've talked about the makeup. Let's get into what physical therapy actually does. Physical therapy does something called myofascial release, which is a skilled passive movement of soft tissue, including fascia, muscles, and ligaments. It's applied using manual therapy. Manual therapy, of course, meaning the hands, by a physical therapist, But it can also be self-applied by a person using sustained pressure and gentle stretching. This is effectively where if you go into a physical therapy clinic and they find a trigger point and they camp on it and they push down with a decent amount of pressure for anywhere between a minute and a minute and a half until you feel that trigger point release. It's the idea of going in and finding those points of tension and then driving a conversation between the fascia, between the muscle and the brain to send a signal from the brain to the muscle saying you need to relax. You're under too much tension. I'm not even trying to use you. So clearly, whatever residual tension is having on, you relaxing is the best thing for the longevity and the health of this body. Now, that's how I usually explain it to my patients. Here we can also see, under the theorized mechanisms, that mechanical loading stimulates mechanoreceptors causing fibroblast reorganization. That's kind of the same thing we've been talking about. It's a really fancy way of saying when you put something under stress and you load it, the fibroblasts are going to activate and start trying to fix any sort of damage, and they're going to respond just wherever the tension is and wherever the pressure is. Sustained pressure increases tissue temperature, this is proven, and hydration, this is also proven. By pushing on that trigger point and holding it for about a minute and a half, what eventually happens is you're driving more blood into the area, which means more oxygen, more nutrients, more electrolytes, more water, and you're also increasing the temperature. This helps normalize the fascia tension through changes in collagen structure. It also causes a signal to be sent from the brain down to the muscle saying, turn off, relax, at the same time. All of this leads to improved tissue oxygenation and reduces the density of that trigger point, which effectively just means it resolves in most cases. But what does this mean? That means no longer is the body receiving a constant, low-key, almost subconscious signal from that knot saying, I'm under tension, because that's what the mechanoreceptors are doing. Whenever you have a knot, it's the mechanical receptors that are telling the brain all the time in the background, whether you know it or not, I'm under tension, I'm under tension, I'm under tension. Every time you try and do a movement, you still have a little bit of a whisper in the back of the brain saying, I'm under tension, I shouldn't be doing this, I have too much tension in this spot, I can't complete my task. That's why releasing it has such profound effects in the clinic that it almost looks like a minor M miracle, because now the brain's no longer receiving that signal in the back of its mind saying too much tension, too much tension. Now it's released. Now the muscle is saying, hey, I'm good to go. Now the mechanoreceptors have stopped sending that signal. The brain says, okay, I'm good to go. I can use this muscle group how I want to, how it's intended to. Instrument-assisted soft tissue mobilization is exactly what it sounds like. It's using an instrument instead of the hands. And this can include stainless steel instruments, Graston tools, foam rollers, plastic tools, all the above. It's basically designed to preserve the hands of the physical therapist. Because in case you didn't know, a lot of physical therapists leave the profession with really bad hand arthritis and wrist issues because of how much manual therapy they do. But effectively, the protocol for using instruments includes like a warm-up, an evaluation, so range of motion or strength assessment. Then you apply the instrument. Then you usually stretch them or load them just a little bit, and then you re-evaluate to see if you've had any change. Shocking absolutely nobody. Tools kind of have the same mechanism as humans, as the hands, right? So manual therapy versus instrument assisted, it's kind of the same sort of idea. There is a theory out there, though, that I wrote down here, that controlled microtrauma can be one of the things that tools do. This would probably fall more under something called body tempering, where they use, like, in some cases, 100 and something pounds weights in order to go in and to relieve tissue tension. But typically, if you're using just the amount of pressure you would for your hands, I guess this could also be a theorized mechanism. But basically, the instruments amplify tactile feedback for detecting fascial restrictions, which helps, again, with the mechanoreceptor stimulation. It helps relieve the tension. The brain recognizes what's going on. And once that tension is resolved, the brain now is no longer receiving that feedback, constantly saying, hey, this muscle is not working the way it's intended to. It can also help break up adhesions, but so can manual therapy as well. Foam roller. I hate foam roller. I don't think it's that good at all. I think everybody should not. I think everybody thinks that they're foam rolling correctly, and most of the time they're not. I actually like using lacrosse balls better. because I think that gets in there and usually alleviates more tension more effectively and more targetedly. But basically, the patient applies body weight to some sort of tool like a foam roller or a lacrosse ball, and this can help create pressure on targeted tissues that can help do the exact same thing manual therapy and instrument-assisted therapy do. This stimulates the mechanical receptors by reducing muscle tone. The rolling motion can also create forces that slide the skin past each other to get some more oxygenation and blood flow in there. And it may help prevent on your own those trigger points forming, though sometimes those things just form no matter what you do. But if you go to a CrossFit box, almost every single CrossFit box has an entire garbage bin full of lacrosse balls that everybody is using before they work out and after they work out. And the idea is, yes, you're going in there and you're loading the tissue. Before I forget too, because I don't think this is in the next slide, manual therapy doesn't have to be done in a specific order. So if you walk into a clinic and your old physical therapist used to do manual therapy in the beginning, and now this new physical therapist is wanting to do it in the middle or the end, that's not wrong. That doesn't mean that they're not treating you correctly. That doesn't mean that they're not using evidence-based to take care of you. It doesn't mean that they're lazy. It doesn't mean that they're distracted. For me personally, I will use manual therapy on some patients in the beginning if I know they're going to respond well to it and it's going to resolve those trigger points and allow them to do the exercises and interventions that I need them to. Some I will have warm up first and then do manual therapy afterward because they've already increased that blood flow and the oxygenation. And now when I go in there and try and do trigger point release, especially on the stubborn areas, I have a much better chance of resolving it. Same technique, manual therapy, different time applications because I'm going after different things. A lot of the times with my newer patients, the first couple times that I'm seeing them, I will just go straight at it with manual therapy first thing right out the gate, try and release those trigger points, have them exercise, come back, sit down, see if I can get those stubborn points out. If I can, awesome. If I can't, from that point on, I'm probably going to have them do some sort of warm up, a few interventions, then lay them back down and try and do manual therapy because again, there's more oxygen in the blood now. There's more blood flow. There's a higher chance of me actually getting that trigger point, that fascia, to be hydrated and the muscles around there to get increased oxygenation and then relax. It's also a better chance too because the brain now is more aware that it's using that muscle group. So it might respond better to the mechanoreceptors being put under pressure for a prolonged period of time, and then the brain might be more likely to send that relaxed signal. That's my opinion. I don't have any evidence for this, but that's just my personal opinion. But don't think that if a physical therapist was waiting to do manual therapy at the end, they're actually trying to bamboozle you. A lot of times they have a good clinical reasoning for why they're doing that. So how does fascia respond to all these things? In the immediate, it's the fibroblasts. It's those cells that are responding to tissue changes in stiffness. And if there's any damage in the collagen or the elastin, they're trying to go in there and repair it, but that's going to be based on the direction of where the force is coming through them. So if you think of north to south, if those fibers are being stressed and damaged, that's where the fibroblasts are going to go to work. But now is a good time to also tell you most fascia is omnidirectional. And that's great because that means when the fascia is being pulled in different directions, the fibers that are being damaged or used in a specific direction are going to be the ones that become damaged, which are the ones that the fibroblasts go and work on. All the other ones that are not being used, say the east to west direction, they're going to stay intact and they're not going to need to be built up or reinforced. And that's what I was saying earlier is over time, you're going to have fascia that's gotten used to being loaded in one specific direction and built up to resist forces that in one direction. So if it's used to going north to south, and that's the fiber direction that is being built up the most, the minute you start adding some east to west in there for the first time with a significant load, the fascia is going to be unprepared for that loading, as much as it would be if it was receiving north to south. The physiological impact, like we talked about, is improved oxygenation, reduced tension, and reduced density of that area, which is what we're going after. That's why when you're having trigger point release, for example, there's a spasm and then the muscle releases. That would be that reduction in density and that reduction in tension. So there were a couple research articles in here that I added for instrument assisted. There was a systematic review that was done in 2023. where using instruments helped improve range of motion, joint force, peak torque, and it helped improve isometric strength and power. These are all just basically saying their range of motion got better, their strength got better. The dosage was at least 90 seconds per muscle group with a warm-up exercise. So this is one thing you can talk to your physical therapist about and say, hey, I would like to try this because I'm having a lot of trigger points or a lot of tension or a lot of issues. Can we try instrument-assisted soft tissue mobilization? Because according to myofascial release strategies from Science Direct in this case, from May 2023, I saw these changes and I think these are the changes that I want. That's why this is here, to help drive that conversation with your physical therapist and say, look, I know that this exists and I think I could benefit from it. I personally don't like instrument assisted. I would much rather do manual therapy with my hands. Another research article, this is for Taekwondo athletes from 2023 as well. This showed that doing fascial therapy, what they call fascial therapy, which is soft tissue mobilization, improved flexibility, improved vertical jump height, improved the speed and the anaerobic strength of the 32 athletes that they were examining. So again, it's just a stronger justification to say to your physical therapist, hey, there is evidence for this out here. I think I would benefit from it. It shows that you've done your homework. And any physical therapist that hears you say, I did some studies and I found a 8-week Taekwondo study from 2023 or a systematic review from 2023, they're going to peek up and say, really? Where did you find that? What study do you have? And how do they do it? And then they might be interested in trying to replicate that with you, which could get you better care. Physical therapists love when you walk in with studies and say, I think this might help me. So clinical applications, what's the takeaway? If your physical therapist isn't assessing for myofascial restrictions, trigger points, tightness, range of motion restrictions, you can ask them to. You can say, hey, I think I'm having a lot of tightness in my quad, and that's why I can't bend my knee as far back as I want to on this side as I can with this side. Treatment, you can say, hey, I think I would benefit from some manual therapy, especially with this muscle group, which I just haven't been able to stretch or release on my own. And then integration, once you and your physical therapist kind of go through, hey, how does manual therapy work in here? How does it work well for me? Is it I need to warm up first, then I can do some lacrosse ball, soft tissue mobilization or whatever. Y'all can talk about how it's going to be built into your programming. So the key points, again, fascia is a continuous tension network that transmits forces through the body. Manual therapy helps create measurable changes in density, tension, and helps stimulate mechanoreceptors to release and to relax. Remote intervention, so that means working one part of the body on the fascia can have a change in a completely different region because of those fascia chains. And also evidence supports instrument-assisted soft tissue mobilization as well as manual trigger point release, both of which you can talk to your physical therapist about, and they can determine if it's appropriate for you. And then here are the references in case you're interested, which I'll copy and paste down into the description as well. But that is the WaveTop 101 of myofascial, manual therapy with a focus on myofascial release and also fascia and how it all ties together. Now, the next series that you're going to hear is going to be called Mission Ready Body. This is something that is going to be primarily for veterans, but it has a lot of benefit for everybody. So I highly recommend that you guys dive into that. This is going to be like a 16-week series for season 1. And if it goes well, we'll do season 2. But already I've recorded 5 episodes. And let me tell you, the amount of research that I've poured into this to make it a like soup to nuts. Here's how you can evaluate yourself. Here are some special tests. Here's a lot of like the behind the scenes peek of how physical therapy delves into things. It's extraordinary how much, with the help of the internet, with the help of some AIs to really try and streamline it down. It's great. I've been listening to them on repeat already just to see if the quality was good and the educational benefit is there. And my goodness, I'm so excited to bring it to you guys. So a lot of these more topic driven, like what is manual therapy? what is this one? Those might start falling away because the next series I'm doing that's so much more highly structured and educational that I think you guys are going to enjoy it a lot better. But all that being said, if you like this video, if you want more topical things, leave a like, comment, tell me what you want me to work on next. And please, again, consider joining the Patreon as it helps make all these things possible. Now, everybody stay happy, stay healthy, and stay awesome. And I will catch you guys all in the next episode.